right,
Yeah.
hello, and welcome to another highly critical episode of Junkcast. I am the cutlery on the lookout for tangents, which is Kozi Spoon, and with me are a new pair of non-staff co-hosts who are joining me tonight. Introduce yourselves. Say hi to the people.
Hi, my name is Ernesto. I joined Void, I think, in about 09, 2010. So I was kind of in that era with all the old guard. I got to see it when it was transitioning to Void is now, and I have a couple of comics in there. They're all right. And right now I'm going to school as a storyboard artist. So yeah. What about you, Heathen? Who are you?
I'm Heathen. My character on the site is the Smile. Currently the mayor of the city. Maybe you've heard of him. No, I was kidding.
I'm kind of a big deal.
Big deal. No, I came onto Void in 2015. So really near basically at the end of where there were still a few of those older people on there as they were kind of dwindling and mostly coming back just for the big events and things like that. And basically I came in just late enough to fall in love with a few artists and writers on the site and not get to battle them before they left, which I very much regret. I
was just about to ask who your loves were, and you just ousted them as saying that they left, so it can't be me. Oh no.
Yeah, most of them are gone. I love Jaime's writing and art. Underwood, I was lucky enough to, which I actually didn't realize he wasn't around as long as I thought he was. He was only on the site a couple of years before I came, I think. But luckily he came back and I jumped on him immediately, and that's been fun.
Nice.
Yeah, Eric Raffleque.
These are all the classics. These are all classic names.
Full of things. But yeah, I still need to battle Kozi, actually.
Yes, and this shall happen.
Yeah.
But enough about me and us and you. I just wanted to sort of feature our first non-staff peoples, regular voiders, just like you guys, because I like the perspectives that you guys are going to be bringing based off your intros. One of you is old school, the other one's more new school. So I feel that there's a great marriage of like the knowledge of Void in the before time and what it's evolved to now. Because for anybody who's been here and as old as dirt as me, you totally see the difference. But before we get into that, before we get into all the comics that we've selected, I wanted to do a quick little special Junkcast note. I don't know if you guys are aware, based off of the graphic that I did for this episode of Junkcast, there was a little bit of hint that there was a possibility that we're going to be discussing Flighty's comic. But after discussion with Flighty, when they contacted us, the staff AMA, it was noted that their Beyond Battle comic was listed as no critique desired, which, considering the theme of this episode of Junkcast, totally doesn't work. First and foremost, I just want to say Flighty has done nothing wrong, and it's totally my bad. Crit preferences are there for a reason and should be taken into account. I just get really excited, and I grab all the comics that are on the front of the site because I want to feature all you guys, and I just think you guys are great. But we're 7 episodes into Junkcast. This is our 7th one. And it's good to remember that this is still an experiment and an effort in trying new things. But first and foremost, it features the efforts of the community. Unfortunately, that feature comes with some degree of critique and discussion. So for the future, I just wanted to lay out a little bit of ground rules and announce some updates going forward. When selecting comics to feature on Junkcast, we'll be taking the crit levels into account, which we should have in the first place. But, you know, this is me catching up because I'm junky. The comics listed as no critique desired, but comments encouraged will be respected and will not be taken into account in any episode of Junkcast. But I highly encourage the community to listen to that critique level and comment on the comics, because that's what the people want. And comments are encouraged. But for the sake of simplicity, and because I'm smooth-brained and it'll just help me, Junkcast will not be touching them. That said, I want to ask Heathen and Ernesto, since we're on the topic of crit levels, what does that mean to you? Discuss.
Crit levels. Are you asking me like just in general, like the option of giving crit levels, or?
Well, to give a quick little rundown in history, the crit levels are sort of a new thing on Void. I believe that they were implemented at the end of 2018, and based off of what level you chose, it affected your community's response. So, for example, Flighty choosing, no critique desired, comments encouraged, or there's no preference, or, high critique desired. What do you guys think of that implementation?
That's interesting. Listen, I've been on and off this site since 2014. I think 2014, 2015 is when I like kind of left, and then I'll come in and peek a little bit. And I never knew about this. It's fascinating to me. I think it's cool to a good degree. Like I think it's really cool that now people can choose the level of crit that they desire off of this stuff. Some people are definitely here to learn, and some people are here to just like have fun.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, like I do wonder how people respond to when they see those comments or when they see that little option there. I'm sure there's some people that will look at a comic that says, "Hey, I want like an extreme crit," and either they're ready to just jump in there and get into the nitty gritty, or they might feel like they're not qualified enough to talk about it. Same thing for like no crit desire. Like sometimes I'm wondering if people are like, you know what? Then I guess I'm not gonna say anything, or if people would just go, okay, cool. Then let me just give this person a lot of love.
I want to hear your thoughts, Heathen, but just I want to interject real quick. I'm kind of in that camp. It's something that I'm definitely trying to break away from because I definitely see like I don't want any critique, and that totally makes me go like, well, it makes me super critical of what I'm going to say. I'm like, well, I want to say something about the comic because I really enjoy it, but I worry that I'm unintentionally putting in critique without even realizing. So I just shy away and go, well, maybe I won't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
Heathen, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll admit I'm kind of an asshole on this one.
You're new Void.
Well, yeah, I kind of pine for an era that I wasn't actually here for. So maybe I have a romanticized version of it. Just I've done a lot of diving into. When I first joined Void, I started digging through the backlogs of all these things. Like I don't know if I just clicked on the random comic that popped up in the sidebar or what, but I just started going through. Maybe I found the character list and just started looking at top characters, or I don't know, but I just got really into looking at old Void comics. So I've read a lot of old stuff, and with many of those, you get to see all of the comments on the ones where the comments are still available. And
yeah, Old World Void comments were a journey.
Yeah,
it was some of those comics, man. It's a madhouse. And
oh yeah,
there was absolutely a lot of toxicity going on there, both just over competitiveness as well as just stuff that, you know, I don't want to defend it at all, but, you know, the early 2000s, just some of the casual, you know, homophobia and things, the or phrasing things just would not fly anymore, and obviously wasn't good then, but that's a whole different thing. But that stuff's all still there, you know, all the warts and all. So you can kind of see some of that it was young kids, you know, teenagers.
It was definitely a product of its time.
A product of the time, thanks. But
I think that goes for any website. Like, and I'm going off of like my background, but like when I worked on DeviantArt, it was very much like 2000s DeviantArt is very different from what it is now, which is a ghost town, but that's neither here nor there.
So what I'm really getting at is I don't love that stuff, but I love how active the site was back then. I don't know if any kind of forum-based website can even think to achieve that level of activity anymore, especially as the average user is maybe getting older. Because back then, the people that, I don't know how old the people were that made the site, but most of the people on the site seemed like they were in high school age. And it's just kind of a different time now with all the social media stuff we have to do. It's looking for a site where you can make comics is more and more niche, I think. But,
real quick, since we're talking about like crit levels and just how differently Void has changed, that's something that completely like popped into my head, and I'm wondering if this is just a shower thought, but would you say that when it comes to crit levels and what people want and don't want, at the end of the day, there is always going to be a crit, with the voting scores being unavoidably available on every single battle, regardless of what it is?
I mean, if you want to be very literal, yeah, it's not going to technically be a crit, but that is a form of judgment. To be honest with you, like seeing a 56% on my score on something that I told people not to give me comments on may or may not affect me as if I was just reading the comments as well. I mean, at the very least, like at least for me, the big question would just be like, damn, I wonder if people hate this. Like, I wonder if people just really hate me and they don't want to tell me. It's like that kind of thing. Like I don't know. That's how I would feel about it. I'd almost feel like at some point you just be like, hey, you know what? Just take off the rating system. I just want to put this comic out, and that's it.
Point that raises a question like, what is Void to you? Is it sort of an alternative to Webtoons? Is it a place just to put your comics up into the void, so to speak, or is this a place for you to interface with people in the community in which they will have a reaction to what you share?
That is a good question. At least
Heathen,
for me,
what are your thoughts?
Yeah, go for it, Heathen.
Yeah, I totally was rambling on that last question. Didn't really get the point of it, but I'm very much for what I perceive to be the original spirit of the site, and I think a lot of that comes from just my love of fighting games. And I know that
same.
From what I understand, the premise of Void that excited me about it when I stumbled upon the site was, it's like a fighting game where you have to draw a comic to show the fight. That's awesome. I love it. I've played
fully agreed.
There's a card game that I think it was a Kickstarter thing called Story War. I think there was maybe a pilot on Cartoon Hangover for it or something like that, but it's basically the same premise where you have prompt cards that you all draw, and then you just sort of tell a story using those elements, and the other side tells their version of that story, and it's usually a conflict or some sort of scenario like that. And then there's another person that's the judge, and they just award the round to whoever's version of that encounter they liked better. That's just what Intervoid is. You just have to make comics.
Yep.
And the best way to get better at making comics is to make comics.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think by its just the concept of, hey, it's a thing where you're making comics. It's like a reason to make comics. I feel like the point is to get better at doing that, because Intervoid is not a place to build an audience. Intervoid is fairly insular. I mean, if you want people to just see your stuff and get your ideas out there, go on Webtoons, go on Facebook, go on Instagram, Twitter. Post your stuff in a place where it's your turf, and
definitely
are going to consume your work and share their opinions. Sure, you're still putting yourself on the internet and opening it up, but I feel like the point of Void is for constructive criticism and feedback, and to help each other get better at this medium that we love and that we're engaging in a competitive setting. And that's doesn't need to be a raucous, people throwing insults at each other and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's the point. You don't have to be toxic about it to understand that it is at its core a competitive comic battling website. I don't really know why you would waste your time on Void if you weren't looking for feedback.
Personally, for me, and I'm just speaking to something I may not know, but this is my observation and my time here. It's difficult to forge a following, like if you're on Tumblr or if you're on your own Twitter. And I feel that Void's community is sort of baked in, and we're all really super passionate about comics and characters. So when people put in their character and everybody just sort of love bombs and goes, I love this, I want to see work on this, I want to see what you're going to do with it, that's pretty easy. And that can get pretty addictive. Like, it's like, yeah, people are into this. I want to do comics. But there's the whole added, like, but I have to compete. I have to battle with other people. Or, we also give you the option for beyond battles. But I always considered battling other artists to be sort of the meat and potatoes of the site.
Yeah. Do you mind if I interject real quick, Ethan?
Do it, man.
Yeah, like I'll say this from experience, again, being like a 10-year-old voider at this point.
But you're older than that.
Well, I'm older.
You sound like 30s.
It's been 84 years.
It's been 84 years, Nah, I just like Cantinflas says, I just no me pongo los años, no me las quito, or some shit. But
That means I love you all. Please keep doing comics.
yeah. Anyways, let me get to what I was trying to say. I have actually seen people that are really good at Void, and what I mean is that they have their followings, they have a lot of love, they become very passionate, and so their writing, like all the love shows in their writing and their battles and their tourneys. And then when it's time to move on, I mean, I feel like everybody, like to some degree, you have to move on from Void and do things on the side. Even if you want to come back to Void, you should definitely do your own projects, your own personal projects. I'm a big advocate of that. But I see what you say is that those artists that I'm not going to name names, they're very good writers, they're very good artists, but then once it's time for them to do their personal projects or to do something outside of Void, they get very nervous. And
I totally want to touch on that because I follow artists who aren't on Void, and I think that goes overall for any artist who's trying to strike out by themselves. Like, I just read a tweet from an artist I really enjoy who does a webcomic where she said, I know people are reading this and I'm working really hard, but sometimes it's really tough to do all this work and not get instant feedback and not, hear nothing from the Void who are obviously watching. But you wonder, like, do you guys even like this? Like, having that line of communication from your following and the content that you do, I think is a very, it's a balancing act for any artist.
Definitely. And that should be like a topic all on its own. Like, I feel like we could definitely spend an hour on some other week, like talking about this alone.
Heathen, do you have any thoughts? Because I feel I'm digressing, so I'm going to reorient.
Just to touch on what Ernesto basically said, I think the thing that I kind of feel strongest about, and this goes back to the original question of like how I feel about critique levels and feedback and things like that, which is Void characters to me are meant to be action figures. They're meant to be toys. You are
Gotopods.
Yeah, I mean you're well, they're meant to be fighting game characters, even if you're not doing a fight comic, which you don't have to do a fight comic, but they are meant to be characters that you are understanding that you are giving the community to do with as they want. So Void is not the place to tell your story. It's not the place to do your graphic novel. It's not the place to do your webtoon, your weekly webcomic. It is a community site where you are acknowledging that the other people on the website are going to play with your toys and they're going to do whatever they want with
here. I love that.
So at its, I mean, that means that the only thing that you could possibly be really wanting to get out of engaging with Intervoid is furthering your craft of making comics, because otherwise they're, like I said before, I feel like Void is the worst possible place to try and tell your character's story on your terms, because that's just not what the site is for. It is, it's a two-sided thing, and to disregard your opponent's comics or to just not engage with other people at all, it's just kind of, people aren't going to get excited for that kind of thing. They want to see the outcome of battles mean something, and people kind of have fun with it and
I know I keep beating this dead horse, but I'm doing it again because I think it's a fantastic example. But I totally want to spotlight JC's Gossamer Swan character, in which she has, the character has suffered losses in comic battles, but that loss has birthed a fantastic storyline, and I'm super into it. And that wouldn't have happened if that artist said, well, I'm going to disregard that. It doesn't matter. I have a story to tell. I wonder how differently Swan's story would have gone if she just disregarded all that and the artist just did her own thing.
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts on that, and just my personal belief, even though I don't engage in them nearly enough, I want to, but my belief that the Scar match is the most pure form of what Intervoid is really about, and the best way to engage with Intervoid and to create characters or to bring characters to Void that you are totally okay with another person potentially altering. That is the best way to do Void, but that's a totally different topic, and I would love to be on the podcast for that discussion.
Definitely.
Sure. I have one more discussion point, and then we're going to get into what you guys think makes good crit, because I think it's a great question right now. But we have Sai in the Void Lecture Notes saying, isn't getting other people's characters right a skill on its own too? I'm going to go first because I have thoughts.
Go for it.
I agree and I disagree, like on equal measure. I think it's really cool when someone is loyal to someone's character, depicts it really well, and is in your DMs every day going, tell me questions. I have questions about the character. I want to get details. I want to make sure that I get the character just right. But I've been personally in battles where someone has gotten my character completely wrong, or reimagined it, or did them in a different universe, or gave them a different style and look. And there were aspects that I never would have considered. There were things about it that I was like, I never would have thought of it that way. That's completely not the character I wrote, but the way you interpreted it, I think is super cool. And I think that's sort of born of, as you said, Heathen, having people play with your action figures. They might not play with a Barbie the way a Barbie should be played, and I think that's neat.
Yeah, I agree with that too. At the very end of the day, I always feel like it depends on your intent. I'm gonna talk about this a lot too during the crit every once in a while. Your goal as the artist for your story, and your goal as the artist for each of those characters, because they're a part of your story. I do agree that you should practice trying to interpret a character the way their original artist will write them and draw them and stuff like that. Like, you should practice that every once in a while, because I feel like for creating characters later down the line, it's a really good skill to have, like to kind of put yourself in other people's perspectives and shoes and stuff. But
I can see that, definitely.
But it's a fun exercise too. I actually had a battle with Justin, and I totally forgot the character's name. It's on the tip of my tongue.
J-Pop?
But no, not J-Pop. It was the cat one, Mr. Jingles.
Oh, okay.
and the way I did the entire comic for that battle was that I was like, I don't know what to do with Mr. Jingles because of these problems that I'm personally having, and I only have so much time to do the comic. So I'm gonna make this high school AU. Mr. Jingles is like a very Bishonen character. And
so much fun though.
Yeah, and if for those that don't know my character Sonny Del Salvador has a robotic eye and a robotic arm, and for this one, I just kind of gave him an eye patch and called it a day, and put him in a Japanese school uniform, and that's how I did the comic. So just to have fun with it. So there's definitely like two sides to that coin.
Yeah, I don't think that there's a right or wrong answer there. Like when people choose one side, I go, oh, I love that. When people choose the other side, I'm like, I love that too. So there's no really like way where I go like, oh, I hated that. Heathen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like Ernesto's opinion on that. To me, I only ask one thing of my opponent. Tell me a good story.
Oh yeah.
I don't want people to follow my character's model sheet. I don't want them to ask me what clothes, look at the thing and just be like, okay, white shirt, black pants. Okay, cool. Suspenders. All right. I want you to do something that I wasn't going to do. I want you to show me something that I wouldn't have thought of on my own. I want you to surprise me. And really, I think the only thing that you need to do and worry about is staying true to the spirit of the character, both yours and your opponent's characters. Much like Ernesto was saying, if you want to set your story in a completely different genre setting, art style and all, and try to do that, and it's like, okay, well, a character that has a robotic eye and a robotic arm wouldn't make sense here, but if you put an eye patch on that character and you draw them in a way that they are recognizable as Sonny, great. I don't care that you didn't stay on model sheet or whatever. I care if your character looks consistent throughout that comic.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
But I don't care if you followed my drawing. I don't want you to try and mimic my art style just out of some obligation. Like, I want you to, you know, don't try to give me what I would do. Don't try to think about what I would do.
We want you.
do
That's what you're saying.
Yeah, do whatever you would want to do with this character and have fun with it. And because, again, my reason for being here is to learn to make comics better and to enjoy creating comics. And if the comic that you make is fun and interesting to read and it satisfies the rules of Void, and that, you know, the other people don't think I didn't see the smile in that comic, you know.
Yeah.
You've done it in such a way that it's apparent that that is the character. There you go. And just real quick, I won't go off on a tangent on this, but just to go back to the previous thing that I had said, that's part of why I don't believe that Void is a good place for anything other than engaging in competition and focusing on the craft of making comics, using your characters as a vehicle for that, because I'm having a brain fart all of a sudden, man. I'm old. I was just, I don't know. What am I trying to say here? Basically, that
you shouldn't be so precious about your character sometimes.
Yeah, don't feel precious about that stuff. And there was some other better point that I was trying to make about the nature of that, but it'll come to me when it's late to mention.
Can I interject while you're thinking about that though?
Roll on it.
I will say though too, like I've seen people, and I know beautiful friends of mine that they want their characters interpreted a very certain way. It's kind of like what Sai said, like trying to get it right. You're using my character. I want you to get it right. I want you to write them right. They wouldn't say this. They wouldn't do that.
I gotta be beautiful friends. What about your ugly friends?
I'm my ugly friends too, but
ugly friends represent.
Oh, hopefully I'm not cutting off eating because I heard some sounds. But
no.
Okay, so I hear people that will be very particular with how you work with their character, and you're battling them. And sometimes for battles, you know, everyone has their preference for how they and their opponent will do their battles individually. But I personally don't like always bugging my opponent over, hey, I'm going to do this in my comic. Is that going to be okay?
Yeah, I think the good rule of thumb is to just sort of do a temperature check, because every voider isn't the same. Some people are just super hardcore. They're like, let's go, we're gonna battle, and the line is drawn, don't touch me until the deadline's over. And some people are super collaborative, even in a competition shedding. Yeah, I can speak English, so do that.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, if you do the comic and you don't get your opponent's character right, going back to why we're here, because we're talking about critiques, hear the critique and just like take the L, because at the end of the day, no, Void should be about taking L's and learning from the L's. The L is for learning, not for losing.
Oh, I like that. Yes, I agree. I concur. Heathen, last words, and then we're going to get up on it.
Yeah, I didn't remember what I was going to say before, probably, but to Ernesto's point just now about talking, how much you want to talk to your opponent or not. I'm definitely, for better or worse, I'm in the camp of less communication with my opponent, but I am a firm believer in scar matches being ruthless, but
if Void was like exercise, you'd be CrossFit right now, or like P90X.
Yeah, no, but so in the interest of, again, avoiding toxicity and mean-spiritedness while touting the virtues of trial by fire, if anyone's gonna scar match me personally, I would talk to them before they accept the match and say, hey, just so you know, I want you to do your worst, and I am not going to take your advice. I'm going to do whatever I want to do with your character. If you're okay with that, let's go. If not, don't fight me on this, because
let it be known, Junkcast listeners, this is hardcore mode. This is like the final boss if you scar match Heathen.
I'm talking hardcore mode, but I'm also a pussy. That's why.
No, what's funny is that
Scar matching with a smile because I got stuff I want to do with him before he gets all messed up. Because when I scar match, I'm like, yeah, cut his arms, do whatever you want with him. If I lose, I should have beat you. You know, trying to make better comics. If my comic wasn't good enough to beat yours, I deserve whatever came to me.
Nice.
And the most interesting Void stories have come out of Scar results.
Oh
That's
yeah,
true.
for sure. Completely agreed.
The best Void characters were forged in Scar matches.
But I want to motor to the meat and potatoes. The reason you guys are here, all the good stuff. What makes a good crit to you? We have two perspectives. Ernesto, you're going first. Old world versus new world critique. Ernesto, go.
Oh, dude. Well, my point of view has changed from the old world. The old world view, a crit is like, let me read your comic, and I'm going to point out every single mistake you're making, and I'm going to make you cry about it. That's kind of changed. Like, after going to school and after meeting professionals and this, that, and the third, I learned that you got to do, like, the crit sandwich. You have to start off a crit by, like, first of all, don't be subjective. Don't just say, hey, I don't like this because I don't like this color. You put blue on your comic. I don't like blue, so your blue sucks.
Okay.
You got to be objective. You got to read the comic for what it is, not what it feels like. And then you got to see, you know, what's reading well and what isn't reading well. And what I mean by that is, like, is the story clear to you? Is the way the story drawn clear to you? And then you go off of that. You go by saying, hey, these are the positives of your work. And then here's the things that, even if it's working or not working, this is how we can get it a little bit stronger. This is how we can make it stronger. And then you kind of conclude by reminding them, hey, you're still making strides. And there's always room to grow. No matter how good or bad you are, there's always going to be room to grow. And we encourage you to get better. And that's what a crit should be at the end of the day. It should be a way to encourage people to get better.
I concur.
Agreed.
Heathen?
Yeah, I think the crit or the compliment sandwich is sort of it's just more of a rule of thumb, sort of a guideline for people who are trying to approach critique when they don't really do that sort of thing, if they're not comfortable doing it. But I think unless you're just a total jerk, it kind of comes natural. You're going to include positive things in there really without even having to think about it or without trying. You know, I certainly don't believe in offering a kind word for every critical word.
I can agree with that.
That's what Ernesto said, but some people seem to take it very literally, where it's like you have
to.
Yeah. Good thing, bad thing, good thing, bad thing, and like really just kind of counteract the pros and cons. And I really wouldn't prescribe to that. In fact, more often than not, I actually take more of an editorial approach to the way that I critique comics. And occasionally I come off sounding maybe a little harsh to some people, and I've certainly had people express that they appreciate how just cut and dry I was about things. It really depends on who you're talking to, and I think that's important to know. Just kind of, yeah, like Kozi said earlier, get the temperature a little bit. You know, it's okay to talk to somebody before you critique their comic. Hit them up on Discord and just, you know, hey, are you okay with this? Blah blah blah. Just kind of get to know them a little bit better, and I think depending on who you're, you know, getting to know everybody, you'll kind of feel it out. But
Ernesto sort of gave his perspective on this, but I kind of want to hear your thoughts, because you sort of touched on you're not really a fan of, like, well, you know, alchemist rules, for every bad thing I say, I'm going to add a good thing. What do you think of the other side of that pendulum, where it's like, well, I already know that this artist is good at this stuff, so I'm not even going to touch upon it. I just want to focus on all the mistakes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when I say an editorial approach, I've never actually worked as an editor, but I you know, I
cosplay as one.
Yeah, there you go. I consider it sort of if I don't point it out, it's because it's working. So I'm just focusing on where things can be tightened up or done differently to make the comic work properly. And, you know, this might be an unnecessary concern. Maybe people aren't taking it this way, but I kind of feel like that's more valuable than trying to point out the good things, because then the person might think, oh, well, he didn't mention this. Is it because he didn't like that or something? Whereas if I'm only giving them the stuff that stood out to me as not working in the comic, then hopefully it's understood that it's just because.
Question for the both of you then.
But I will point out things that impress me, especially. I'll say, like, oh wow, this was great, but I won't hit on everything that's just working. It's
gotcha. But I have a question now for the both of you, because you just brought up a really good point, Heathen. If someone only has like, well, I want to help this person out, so I'm only going to critique the things that I thought were shortcomings or things that they can improve on, and say that artist, I don't know, I'm just going to make something up, was really trying hard to improve on their backgrounds, and no one brings it up because they look great now. Like, do you think that's okay? And as the artists themselves, at what point do they go like, well, I mean, are my backgrounds any good? Because no one's saying anything about them.
You know what? That could go in different ways. I do feel like you as an artist, to some degree, like you should have a little bit of responsibility to tell people, hey, you know what? For this comic, I was really focusing on this. So if you guys have any thoughts on this, let me know. I've done that before myself. I've told people, hey, this comic I just focused on writing. So what did you guys think? And some people will actually give me feedback, and some people will just kind of ignore and just do whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
But
that's
no,
actually a really good note. I like that.
Yeah. I also have another thought on like not getting any commentary on something that you worked hard on that you feel like you got kind of ignored. Maybe Heathen might add to this, but yeah, like I feel like that's gonna happen every once in a while. Like you're gonna work hard on something and no one's gonna talk about it. And but yeah, it goes to my first point. Like open mouths don't get fed. So if you really want us to point out that one thing, ask us about it. I think that's important.
In a perfect receptacle for food. How am I not getting fed? And on that note, I really want to get into these comics because we talked for a whole long time.
Okay, yeah, we did actually.
So, just as a quick little recap, seeing that Flighty's Beyond Battle is off the table, I just wanted to give a quick rundown of what we are going to be talking about, which is the Fruits of Regenereg, which is Cocoon and Egg Dealer. And then there's Dr. Freaking Style versus Dingo the Fox, Mr. Kent side, which is Mr. Kent side only, because their opponent also noted that they did not want any critiques. And we will also be talking about both sides of Redacted versus 9 to 5. So I would like to start with the Fruits of Regenereg featuring Egg Dealer.
Oh man.
Let's start with the hard one. At least I consider it the hard one.
Yeah, I love it. Like I always like comics like this. Like I'll be really frank because I'm old Void and I gotta step up to the old Void.
Yeah, give us that old school flavor.
It's weird, but it's a cool kind of weird. It's like Charkley or like there's so many comics that I could just point out, like that baby with the diapers that we had like years ago.
Oh my gosh, Baby Barbarian.
Yeah, no, not even Baby Barbarian. It's the one that was like a Cupid character.
Oh, I don't even remember.
Oh man, I'll look him up and I'll show you guys one day. But you guys should look him. I think never mind. I was gonna point out to some drama. I think he probably hated the site and had us delete his character.
Let's keep it civil.
Yeah, but okay. So this is one of those things where I was talking about being objective, and like I know there's a lot of people that have a hard time critiquing this artist's work because it's so left field.
Oh
yeah. And so that's why when I came into it, like, yeah, I'll have my reaction, and for me, they're good reactions. Like, they're never like, yo, what the fuck? It's always been like, yo, what am I looking at? Like, I want to see.
For sure.
So I look at it objectively, and like story wise, like, here's the thing: as left field as this is, like, I really like that they're trying at a story, and like. There's what seems to be an antagonist at the end of this story. That there's side characters that have their own like history. There's like a little bit of lore in this. I dig that. The concept of like the supermarket concept is amazing. I feel
very
like,
Sausage Party in that way, the movie.
Yeah. It's very hard for me to give any more constructive criticism beyond that because this is like the first time I'm reading this and all these concepts are new to me.
Is
but
this
they're
your
all
first egg dealer comic?
this is my very first egg
Oh,
dealer comic.
welcome to the
Yeah.
fold.
Art wise too, there's a lot of things that that Boogedy's doing that's really kind of good. It's like they're trying out different art styles, whether it's intentional or not. They're trying out different art styles in the same comic. There's a lot of pain relief stuff that feels very naturalistic, despite being a digital comic. It feels very naturalistic in the beginning. I like. We'll talk about those 3 pages, and I'll try to keep it as short as possible. But in those first 3 pages, they're using
Sketchy
a pencil
ones.
brush. Yeah, they're using a pencil brush. They're using these like very naturalistic strokes on the colors. And then it kind of even leads to the gutters of the panels. Like it's all looks like it's made by hand. The only critiques I really have in terms of like things that could have improved those scenes was that if Boogedy could have extended that to even like the speech bubbles, having like the speech bubbles look like they were handmade, that would have kind of added to the art rather than just make it feel like it's just slapped right on top, because it becomes kind of distracting. And
Yeah, for sure.
And that goes back to like the readability of the thing. Another thing that I like a lot is just like how the colors kind of kept a certain tone. But to talk about readability, sometimes the colors were always detrimental. Like sometimes you could feel like they painted on top of the lines, so certain things didn't always read. You would have like the little small egg in the panels, and he's like trying to look for a place to be, and he's looking for a home, but he can't find his home until he finds the egg dealer. And honestly, if a speech bubble wasn't pointing at it, like I would never know that that egg was there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So in those cases, I always suggest that try to bump up your contrast either with your colors, because Boogedy does a lot of rendering, or so if they could have just bumped up the contrast on the rendering so that the forms could read better, or with the line work, because even on like the shower scene with Egg Dealer, if Boogedy could have separated some of the bigger masses, I mean, there's no other way I could say it. The bigger masses, like the forearm and the arm, with like clearer lines, so that we can separate it, we can read it better. We could kind of figure out what Egg Dealer is doing with his body.
I have so many questions about that body, but I'll wait for my turn.
Yeah, and but I like it. I like it. I like what they're doing. I want to see more of this and see where it goes. Just like, but if you're gonna do this painterly style, like in the first 3 pages, please like zoom out a little bit or squint and like see if your figures are readable. If the thing that we're supposed to be focused on is readable and not getting drowned out in like your colors. Like you don't want your colors to work against you. You don't want your art style working against you. So like, you know, readability is clear. I'm going all over the place with this, but I'm also but this is also my first Junkcast critiquing live, so I'm
You're
kind of on the
doing
spot.
great, sweetie. Camera flash.
Yeah. Here, let me go to Heathen for a little bit. See if you can piggyback.
Pass the baton.
Yeah.
Sure. And piggyback is what I will do, because I don't have a lot of technical stuff to bring to this, because I think Ernesto really touched on most of it.
Agreed.
And the only thing that I wanted to really kind of point out that's a really basic, and actually there's been a post on the forum, an old post about how to do these better and things like that. But one of the things that it's me, and I understand that it's hard to do it in practice, but like everyone who has ever read a comic can look at the way that word balloons and fonts and text look in those, and I feel like Boogedy might need to kind of look at their influences and see how, which I suspect may actually be manga. So that may not even really be the best, because the lettering there is usually translated, and it is the way it is because of constraints. But to really look at how comics handle lettering, because it really jumps all over the place. The size, the font changes. I think maybe the font choice was just because the egg's talking a different font than Egg Dealer himself. But the spacing, the kerning, the orientation of the lettering, it just like it seems completely random. Like there wasn't any real concern for keeping it consistent. The leading and everything about it just changes from one balloon to the next. Overall, the flow of the comic, the composition and stuff, it works. I mean, aside from the some of the clarity issues, the actual like size and placement of panels works well. I don't see just like empty space. I think that's one of Boogedy's strengths, actually, is they have a cinematic eye. Like their stuff reads a lot like anime, like not even manga, but like animation a lot. And it tends to work well. Content is another story. That's much more, can't account for taste. And not to say I don't like it, but technically I think it's quite sound, the storytelling. The main thing that I wanted to kind of get at, though, is I feel, and I was actually looking at Egg Dealer's backlog to see just how many, I feel like Boogedy does more Beyond battles than I think they actually do. I think they've got like 4, including this, like maybe 4 Beyond battles to like 7 battles and then even a couple of events. So they're definitely battling people, but I still get the feeling that the world and the story that Egg Dealer that's being pushed for Egg Dealer kind of carries on regardless of other people's characters. And I would like to see more like
influence from other artists,
I would
like universes.
I would like to see other people's characters. It's okay to not set your story in Void City or put a lot of cameos or references and things like that, but I would like to see other people's characters have more of an effect on Egg Dealer, who seems to just sort of trundle along completely in his own world, unaffected by other people's characters.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was wondering about this was whether it was done on a deadline. And I don't think it was, because it's got the 1 week deadline listed, which is the default. So, and I don't think a 1 week of work. So this is probably not done on a deadline, self-imposed or otherwise. And it makes me wonder, though, you know, unless Boogedy just does these, they seem prolific. I don't know how quickly they draw, how quickly long it takes them to do these comics, but I feel like why not just do a battle, or even a collab if you really want to not have a deadline or something like that. But you know, like on this last, you've got all the egg stuff, obviously, but then on this last page, we're introduced to this character with the unibrow. I've never seen him before. I feel like this is the first. It's meant to be a mysterious, like, ooh, who's this guy? What's going to happen next? I love the character design. It's quintessential Boogedy's like crazy, like
I love it.
Kind of weird facial proportions and things like that, crazy expressions, the wall-eyed craziness and stuff. But my question is, like, why not make that a Void character?
You can, yeah.
Involve another side character in it. Why would you not use the opportunity to incorporate another person's character? Because even if you're just doing it in Beyond battles, just get permission and be like, hey, can I use this character, just to like bring some cohesion and that, again, people get really excited to see recognizable characters in this stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Kind of up the engagement of it and make them kind of people in the community more excited for it. And you know, when I don't do a lot of Beyond battles. I don't know if I've ever done a Beyond battle. But if I'm thinking of doing a Beyond battle, I'm basing them, just like when I'm doing a battle, my plot is all revolving around my opponent's character. It's I'm not trying to fit other people into the Smile storyline. Smile's a bad guy. He should not be the focus. He's supposed to be the antagonist. So that means the main character of any battle that I do is my opponent. And I try to make them the main character. And that's how I approach the whole writing of the whole thing. So to me, it seems odd to have such a disregard for the other, not in a disrespectful way, but like to just sort of like not be trying to incorporate these other characters into these major roles of these side characters where the plot's based on them.
Well, that's under the impression that Egg Dealer is a bad guy.
Oh, yeah.
No, not necessarily. Yeah, for the comparison I just made, which I do think that Egg Dealer is an antagonistic character, not a straight up villain. I mean, obviously his goals are kind of, I don't want to say evil, because I think he thinks that, now we're getting into totally different things here, but I think he thinks that making everyone into eggs is in their best interest. I think that's actually been explicitly described in his comics, that he sees it that way. He's trying to help people.
Egg dealers like the Thanos of Void.
There you go.
Yeah.
Half the population are eggs.
The Infinity Gauntlet.
Oh, stop it.
Now that's egg dealer.
Oh, that was so good.
An Armageddon threat with Egg Dealer, which I'm very much for. That's the story. Eggfinity Gauntlet. We have
there you go. The Eggfinity Gauntlet. Oh, what a scramble.
But
man.
My main criticism of a comic like this is that it kind of goes against my what I think Void is primarily about, which is just involve other people's characters, because if not, why don't you just post it on? Why not just have your own webcomic? Like, Boogie has a vision that they are pursuing, and that I love about it. But it seems like the best character development always comes in the Beyond battles, and the battles definitely are outweighing the Beyond battles in number, but it seems like a lot of the battles are sort of incidental, and there's a deeper story that Boogedy is trying to get at, and they're kind of missing an opportunity to incorporate other people's characters in the roles. Like, you could have a role for this guy with the unibrow and think, what active Void character could I possibly put into this role that would serve the same story purpose?
Yeah. And how would they influence it or change it?
Yeah. I think that's, if I'm going to give any kind of feedback on this primarily, I think I would issue that as just something to Boogedy to just like consider. Think
for sure.
The possibility that you could kind of
crack open that egg and let some people in.
Yeah.
Let us world, Boogedy. Let us in.
I definitely had things to say, but I really want to keep motoring because we are sort of short on time. I want to move on to, since it's just the one side, I want to go to the Freakin' Style comic, which should be Kent. Or is it Dr. Kent?
Yeah, Dr. Kent.
Or Mr. Kent. There we go.
Yeah, Mr. Kent. Wow, I haven't heard that name in a minute. That was actually one of my last October battles.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yes, another old school Voider.
Yeah, battled his Miller character. We had a battle of Millers.
Nice.
Yeah, Mr. Kent's comic. One of the things that I kind of appreciate, and it almost seems kind of thematic with one of the other comics that just came out this week or that week, is I like that this is like one of the few comics that is done traditionally.
Yes.
And you kind of get to see like how you can still do a pretty clean comic with clean lines like that. He has a lot of, what I like about Kent too is that I feel like Kent should definitely do his own stuff outside of Void for sure, and he'd probably do a good job at it because the style's really clean. Like, I like his style, I like his line work. I'm even looking at page 6 right now, and I'm seeing how he just draws Dingo the Fox's eyebrows, and they look amazing with like just very minimal line weight changes. The story's really like cute and funny. There's a bunch of creative stuff there too. Let's see. Let me go on page 2. There's the part, no, not page 2, page 3. There's a part where Dingo buzzes the doorbell. And I like that gag that he's buzzing the doorbell and the buzz just follows through the house all the way till it hits Dr. Freakin' Style's head.
Yeah. It's very toony. I love the fact that they really sort of use their comic to feature their opponent. And the hijinks and zaniness was on point for me.
Yeah. And then so again, this is one of those comics where like I like everything about it. And I can't even like comment on any of like the technical aspects of it because I feel like that might just be up to preference. Like if they're not trying to be 100% accurate with their perspective and their volumes and whatnot. I can't really touch on it more. The only thing I could always say is just push it and refine it, and just get it to the point where it's just convincing me that it's just working in this comic. There's little things that could always be improved, like going back to that buzz. Let's go back to readability, because I'm going to harp on that forever. When he buzzes that doorbell, what he could have done that could have like improved it to a certain degree. Sorry, I'm like reading this and thinking.
It's like chewing gum and walking.
I know. Is if that buzz would have, instead of just going across on that third panel, if that buzz just would have traveled between each panel consistently.
So kind of breaking the fourth wall a bit.
Yeah, and then that way, as you're reading the buzz, then you can see like the living room and the hallway and stuff. Because otherwise, like that middle panel with the living room, yeah, we're getting the living room, but we're not getting much story outside of the fact that it doesn't look like it's quite lived in. There's a dead plant and there's a spider web, and then that's it. And like the couch is kind of ripped up. Yeah. But if you would have had that buzz just circling around it, it would have created less negative space. And at the same time, you're leading your viewers' eyes so that they could get in and out of this page and get to the gag on the next page. There's always like little technical things like that you could always push a little bit further, and it'll hit the mark even better than it already did. I
do want to piggyback off of that, just talking about backgrounds and environments. I assumed as we were following that buzz on those pages that the detail of the house interior and the personality of Dr. Friggin were going to be shown in the lab, because that's her whole MO. Like in the design sheet, it says that she's a mad scientist prodigy. Mm-hmm. So I would think if the living room and the hallway that they're establishing is so bare and barely lived in, the personality and the activity would be in the lab. But we saw so little of that apart from a gurney and some unknown, Joe Bag of Donuts getting, gutted. I expected to see like, oh, this is where she lives. This is her personality. Let the room tell the story while she's, cursing and getting hit by the buzz. But I feel that was the most bare room.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And I think that's one of the important things that a lot of people harp on, especially like a lot of professionals harp on, is that story is always important and clarity is always important. If you can tell the story in one panel, like by just showing like things about that story, it can tell a lot. It could tell a lot more than doing like 5 pages of what this person's house looks like. And yeah, like yeah, you see in the background, if everybody's looking at the Void election notes page, you see that you have the operating table and then nothing else. And if this person's supposed to be this like crazy mad scientist, it would help to show more of that aspect in the background, whether it be, a poster, like, a board full of ideas for the next experiment, or like some lab rat in a jar of mysterious liquid with like its brain missing.
I want to see just the attic room in the movie Quarantine. That was the type of environment that I was expecting. Just utter unsettling creepiness.
Yeah, and even if you are the type of artist that doesn't like to do an overabundance of detail, those little touches on either your backgrounds or even on a panel can add a lot. It could even add a lot of rereadability. People probably want to like look back and be like, oh wow, I caught that detail, and I caught this, and I caught that graffiti from that one character on someone else's page. Those little things are always fun. And again, with Void, you got your deadlines. You got your one. Yeah, you probably don't have a lot of time for it. I know I've had many moments where I never had time for those little things, and I always regret it. But if you could ever squeeze that into, like, challenge yourself to like add more character into your pages, into your panels, with little details like that.
For sure. And I'm going to have to cut you off there because I need to hear Heathen's thinks.
Yeah, go for it.
I agree.
Let's move on to the next one.
We're all trying to save time here. No, I think the absence of the backgrounds after page 3 of the comic, basically what's, you got cover and then 2 pages of some pretty good establishing the cameras moving in. I really don't have much of a problem with any of that. And I think Mr. Kent is a good example of clarity over technical, being overly concerned with technical stuff, and that's something that I can actually bog down in. And actually, it's funny because working with Underwood on some comics, he's great for that, where he's just like, oh, just fudge it and it looks fine. Clarity is the most important thing. Your perspective has to be clear, but it doesn't have to be correct.
Exactly.
And, unless that's what you're trying to do. But, when you're on a really tight deadline for a Void comic, just fudge it all. And, I don't think he's done any vanishing points or anything or Horizon, any of that stuff on really any of this, but you get it. You see what's going on. And it works. I do like the cartoon aspects of the Buzz, sort of being a physical object. The battery in his car, his Toon car, has an anthropomorphic battery in it. Stuff like that is great. And that's stuff with Toon characters that I try to push myself more with and I have failed at, I think, in the past, is like really selling their Toonishness. It'd be fun to do more battles with Toon characters to kind of practice that.
Fully encourage this.
Yeah. You have one.
Yes, I do. Gotta bring her back.
One thing that stood out to me looking at this whole comic is there's not a single panel that features a foreground element in the entire comic. And there's just several really obvious places where that could have just been really easily implemented to just add some more depth to the comic. Like on page 6, you could put some tree branches in the foreground, like we're looking down, like there's a tree on the other side of the street that's kind of we're looking through. The lab, like you guys were saying, it's just so sterile. There's just walls and a floor. It's just really just kind of sketched in. There's really not any indication that there's even a lab there at all. It seems like she's just sort of got a table set up in an empty basement of this house or something, which makes me wonder, like, why is this where she does her work, or is she just like squatting in here to do something real quick? I don't really get it. And then, of course, this is just a symptom of Void and time management being an issue and extenuating circumstances coming up in life and stuff like that. But like, this comic ends where it should have started. The next page should have been the first page. I don't actually care about any of this stuff that's in this comic. I want to see these two characters interact, and as soon as they meet face to face, it ends abruptly. And I didn't really.
So you say that this comic is like a lot of preamble, and we didn't get the main event.
Yeah, like if you're writing, I'm very curious what Mr. Kent's work flow and process are when coming up with an idea for a comic. I don't even know if he pencils or if this is just you go straight to ink with a pen. Some of the drawings feel, Kent has a very distinctive style that it's clear that he's comfortable in the way that he draws, and I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't ink his comics, if he was just drawing with a pen.
Yeah.
There are certain things where something, and overall it's competent. It's very like, there's not a lot of obvious blocking issues and things, but there's things here and there where it's just like, if he had penciled this, I feel like he would have maybe budged that person over just a little bit before inking it to not cut their hand off of the panel or something. It's like, why isn't she over just an inch to the right? Things like that kind of make me wonder. But just the speed and the sort of improvisational nature of the comics makes me wonder if he even writes. And I don't say that as a bad thing. I think there's a lot of value in just using Void in particular as like an improv exercise of just like, I'm just going to make up. I mean, that's the hardest part for me, is just getting a story that I'm satisfied with thinking that I can do and getting started. So like if you can just attack a page and just get going and have characters moving around in the environment and doing things and talking to each other at all, even if it's not that compelling, more power to you. I mean, that's better than I can do most of the time. I get hung up on stuff like that. So, but yeah, my main thought is just, it feels like he just started drawing and going with it, and he just ran out of time before he actually got to the story. So I don't know if he had a plot idea or not, or if he was just like, well, he's walking up to the house, and then he goes in, and then she's there, and 3 weeks is up.
Yeah.
Man, mood. Well, with that said, I want to leave it there. Fully encourage you guys for the first two comics that we just featured to add comments. Just if you're inspired by anything we've said, or you agree or disagree, make sure the artists know, because we all love to see comments. I do want to move on to the next ones because we're short on time, and I want to make sure I get everyone's, featured. Let's move on to Redacted versus 9 to 5. And just for the sake of smoothness, I want to go with Fred's first. I just want to add a couple things before we start with Fred's comic. Fred has been known in the community as an artist that really likes experimenting with different styles and formats and what the definition of comics are, which I thought was really important to feature them, because I don't think very many people, when you do battles, especially on a deadline, a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to experiment and I don't want to risk it. I want to win, which is completely valid. But I also think it's a really great inspiration and example to see an artist out there that is going into battles and going, I'm going to experiment with something that I've never tried before. I'm going to try, 3D models as my media, and I'm going to do what I can to work this. If anybody reads this artist backlog, I personally really enjoy it because I think they've done animated GIF pages. I think they've done sprite comics, just different styles and formats and looks and aspects that, at least for me, I never would have considered as a means to make a comic. And I think that's super inspiring. So if you guys got the time to check out the backlog, fully recommend it. That said, let's get into this.
Yeah. This was cool. I don't know how old most of these warriors are now, but if you guys remember like the early 2000s, there was actually like the late 90s too. There was a short time where a lot of early CG artists were trying to make CG comics, and they were trying to make CG book covers, and they were kind of jarring because they look like bad PS3 graphics. Or they look like a screen cap of Reboot. If anybody wants to look up
Reboot.
My
gosh, we're dating ourselves.
I know. But what's cool about this is that I like the intentional use of low poly. It gives a certain tone, like the types of colors that Fred's using is like really good. It's cool once you kind of start setting up limitations like this. Like, I'm only going to put these types of colors. I'm going to use this low resolution polygon kind of feature. It gives you surprisingly a lot of tools to play with. And also one of the interesting things too I like is this story. This story is just like with the nature of the art itself. It's kind of experimental because it's very much like a Dave Lynchian sort of vibe to it. Like,
that is a great reference. I completely agree.
Yeah, it's like the characters acting in one tone, and then 9 to 5 is just very nonchalantly just about the business. And he's schmoozing. He's not being chummy. He's schmoozing. You could tell that this is all to make a sale.
It's funny, what I wrote in my notes, it was that I really liked that Fred's side of their comic explored the practical, void-centric solutions to fantastical and monstrous problems. Because it's no secret the Void is a freaking crazy city. And it's a wonder anybody even wants to live there. But it makes sense that there are regular folk there who are trying to make sense of the chaos. And, this is all just one page because it's in the Webtoons format, but I found it completely genius to take an opponent like Redacted and go, we'll get you signed up for a lower income predator meal supplement. And I'm just like, that's nuts. I never would have thought of that. That's really great.
Yeah, you would think that. I think that's one of the interesting things about writing for Void is that A lot of times I'll see people write Void, and I feel like they make the city itself like a very practical, like mundane city that just happens to have all these fantastical characters.
Murder and mayhem.
Yeah, and they don't think of the fact that because these characters live here in this city, that maybe the city offers certain services and solutions or that works around them.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think about oh gosh, I'm totally blanking. I think the name of the character is David Birch, in which their character is just subterranean and they're always in the sewers and just fixing the city in the background, and that's how they survive and exist, which I think is really cool to have what I guess for most people would consider a regular character in a fantastical setting.
Yeah, definitely. Oh man, I love David Birch. Shout out to Ryan. In terms of like critiques in order to like what to push, what to improve, this is one of those cases where that's hard to give because I need to know the intent behind using these type of graphics. And like obviously I know that they want to do a webtoon format because it supplements the type of 3D models that they're using. It looks like video game screenshots for sure. I think the only thing though is that if you're intending on to make it a little bit cleaner, don't be afraid to, at the end of the day, it's a comic, so don't be afraid to draw over your comic.
That would have been so cool, using the models and then drawing over it for added effect.
Yeah, and since we're talking about that, we're going to see a little bit of that in Redacted's comic.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice switch over, but we still need to hear Heathen's thanks.
Oh, damn. Okay. And I'm playing.
You should have gone second.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love going second, man. I get to like just let him say everything that I'm thinking and be like, sweet, yeah, good. I don't have to be technical on any of this. So actually, too, is one of the last things he mentioned, Ernesto. The way that I take this art style, which first of all, I enjoy it quite a bit. It has its issues that I think come with trying something new and if you're making comics in Microsoft Paint, which I know that program's come a little ways, but back in the day, if you're making Microsoft Paint drawings, you got better at that and things started getting more and more nuanced whether you wanted it to or not. And anytime you switch to a new medium, especially a digital medium, like you're gonna get comfortable with it, and I think it'll smooth a lot of these things out. The one thing that kind of sticks out to me is just Redacted's eye line. It's just like this dead forward. There's no emotion in his eyes.
He's a cold-blooded lizard. What do you want?
Yeah. He kind of looks like he might as well be in a T-pose. He just doesn't look like the face was moved around at all. But that's kind of a minor gripe because the format is just kind of you're just kind of reading what they're talking about. It's not a big deal breaker or anything. I see the use of the graphics as kind of being like trying to imitate the look of an office job, like onboarding orientation graphics. You watch on the computer.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Walk through and they may have some like mild animations, but for the most part, it's just like, hello and welcome to the company. Here we're going to talk about workplace harassment, and we're going to talk about this and that. I feel like that's what is evoked.
Dude, all I think about is the Captain America meme. Grabs a chair, sits in it backwards. So you ate a coworker.
Yeah,
exactly. I really enjoy the sort of meta vibe that goes along with like the comics featuring this character look like the character. I'm curious like how long it takes them to model these characters. I don't know what program they're using, how they're what kind of tools they have at their disposal for this, but it's really cool to see like an anthropomorphic dinosaur character like in this style. It really makes me think like, oh wow, yeah, they can kind of just do anything, and I don't know how difficult that is, but it's cool to see that these are like custom characters and then they just kind of pose them around and move them. And I really like the sort of, I guess, I don't know if I'd call it a webtoons format, just like the infinite scroll format of just not varying the
I am grandma, so anything that scrolls forever I'm just calling webtoons until y'all tell me otherwise.
Yeah. I appreciate the sort of cinematic look of it, where it's just the same size panel and not
for sure
comic layouts and things like that.
Can I interject for a quick second?
I guess
pretty much.
Yeah.
Oh, I had one last thing to say, basically, which is that I think 9 to 5 is a cryptid.
Yeah.
Oh! I like that. Oh,
Yeah,
dude, I totally agree now.
I think he's a little bit of a Tom Bombadil immortal character because he's too chill. He has no fear of personal harm, so I suspect that he is somehow.
Or maybe he's on some seriously good downers. We don't know.
Maybe I suspect more than he looks.
Yeah.
And all right, what's your think?
So I'll just say this one thing, and then we can move on to you or to another topic or whatever. But I will say that if you are going to use this type of format, one of the problems that I could see that could be improved is actually the blocking of the characters.
Oh yeah.
Because it's done very cinematically, or like in a webtoons format, like you can't really follow the same rules as if you had the panels all on like a traditional page. So it's kind of very hard to see shots where like you get one character on one side of the panel, another character on the other side, and then all of a sudden they're kind of jumping around and we're getting just like, breaking 180.
Yeah, they break
it. But I'm always breaking that, man. I gotta stop.
And there's ways to break it, but you have to progress to that. You have to kind of lead into it. So there's a little bit of those earlier shots where it's just kind of like, you got the character like in a front view, like who are you supposed to be, and then supposed to be he's on the same side of the screen. Good job. But then all of a sudden you go to the next shot and he's like all the way on the left, and Redacted's like all the way on the right now. And there's no real progression to how that got there. And I'm not saying that it has to be a subtle one, but it has to be one that kind of makes sense. Like you have to build to it. So I think that's the only thing I will say for Fred is like to be careful with that. Because even when you want to do like an A/B shot, and we can get into that in another podcast or another lecture or whatever.
And y'all are already making plans. I love it.
I know. Even if you want to make an A/B shot, like you have to establish a couple of things in your blocking first before you start making the rules for who goes on what side of the screen for your A/Bs. If 9 to 5 is going to be on the right side of your panel in a type of layout like this, and he's not going to switch over unless you make it a point to have him switch over, then keep him consistently on this side for the A/Bs, for the conversation scene at least. And if you want to flip it for the reveal, like where they show the bloody mess, you can do that. But again, there's ways to build up to it. But this would take like a whole another 30 minutes to get into like how to fix that. So
I love that we have too much to say. That's always a good sign, as opposed to like, I don't think we've yet reached a comic void battle in which we're like, well, I don't have anything. I have two things real quick. Fully love, Fred, that you're doing different styles, and I love that you're always using just different formats. I want to see more of that, but at the same time, I really want to see, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'd love to see you stick with one, because we see this, and I'd love to see what this type of format with your 3D comic styles looks like maybe 5 battles in, using this same style, if it changes at all. And secondarily, I would highly recommend checking out some Webtoons comics. Like my first thought is going to check out Space Boy, which I think is on Webtoons, because the way that they format their infinite scrolling pages and the way they sort of weave the scenes and use the vertical space to tell the story, not just with the stuff that they draw in the panel, but the way they shape the panel to the infinite scrolling page, I think would really benefit your work, because I'd love to see sort of a bleed over using that up and down format to tell the story alongside what you are modeling and putting panel to panel, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Can I add just like one little
I
thought?
suppose.
It's brief. I noticed that there are a couple panels where 9 to 5 is holding his coffee mug in a way that it would just be dumping the coffee out.
Yeah.
I feel
Nice.
like when you're working with 3D models like this, whether you're just basically drawing over them or straight up making 3D models and then basically just screen capturing them, your characters, the expressions are a little bit forgivable because that's a much more nuanced thing. But as far as the poses go, your characters have to be. I expect much more from that because you don't have to draw it. You don't have to think, oh man, I have to draw somebody sipping from a coffee mug. That's hard to do because it is hard to do. When you've got a 3D model, you just pose them. There's no excuse not to have this be a very natural looking character. So I'm less inclined to forgive these like little blunders in like the pose being a little off because it's like you didn't have to draw it. All you had to do is put the characters in place.
I do want to just add a quick thing because Futini did just put in the lecture notes that Fred is 5 battles in. So far, they fought a whole litany of characters up to, I believe, a total of 5. So there are 5 battles on the site. Let me clarify what I mean by that. I'm going by Toy Story rules. Like Toy Story 1, the models and the environments and everything looked so much different from the final Toy Story. That's what I'm talking about. I want to see these models remodeled, see what Fred wants to finagle or fix or go like, you know what, I can improve on that. I can make this cooler now that I understand the program. I want to see that iteration of that comic. And I use quote unquote 5 battles in. I
feel like any artist is going to naturally do that. It's hard enough to get through one comic without hating it by the end. I can't imagine anybody creative not just naturally wanting to iterate on their thing, like 5 comics in or 10 comics in or 2 comics in, whatever. I can't imagine anybody not looking at the previous battle and just being like, I could do that better. I don't think anybody's making a conscious decision of like, I made these character models, I'm done. I could just make comics.
We don't know, so I want to just put it out there. I'd love to see this just flip it and reverse it and kit batch and go nuts on it.
Yeah.
That said, shall we move on, gentlemen?
Yeah.
We have so many things to say and so many comics to go.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to go. I think so. Wait, is this the last one?
I think it's the last
one. Oh, okay. I thought I had like 3 more to go. All right, then this is the final one. We're going with Candy Corn Rhino side.
Yeah.
Ernesto, you can begin.
I could begin. Whoa, what? Again, one of the things that I actually talked about outside of this was I was almost wondering if this side of the comic was almost a prequel to Fred's side.
Before you go on, I do want to give a quick little recap. This comic from Candy Corn Rhino, I can speak English, I swear, is sort of picking up on the events of their last battle, which I believe was a Beyond battle, in which Redacted is sort of wandering the snow, is seeking help, finds a little homeless troop, in which they say, yeah, we'll take you across the city, we'll help you out. And he finds himself in an abandoned, what do you call those big metal boxes?
Warehouse?
It's like a supply crate or something, but big enough. There we go, a shipping container, in which he finds one of the troop people there, and he's just so hungry. And it just ends with all of us going, oh man, bad stuff is going to happen. And this comic picks up on where we left off there, in which that poor hobo, had a bad time.
Oh, wow. That's unfortunate. No, but at the same time, I like to think of it as like Fred's comic took place right after this side of the battle.
I like that. I love that look.
Yeah. Even though it's very obvious that Fred's comic does pick up after the Beyond battle. But okay, so one of the things that I was talking about readability, and I wanted to point this more out with Egg Dealer and the other comic. But this does something that I feel like more people should practice, and again, it's leading the eye. One of the cool things about this comic and the way it's using heavy blacks is that you can kind of you can use these gradations that could take your eye from the left side of the page all the way to the right side of the page. And it's great. It's a great tool that you can use. It keeps you from staying on one panel too long. It keeps it from like giving you an awkward pause. Like you totally take advantage of it. These are all compositional techniques that anybody could kind of just do some research and learn and then figure out how to apply on their whole page. And I'm seeing in this redacted comic that a lot of that is being used in a very clever and clear way. I especially love this opening shot. Let's go. Let me go check to see. Also on the topic of using 3D models, we kind of see when we get to 9 to 5's day to day, a good use of models for the backgrounds. Yeah,
reference was used, and it totally shows.
Yeah, and I remember back in the old school, like the old days of Void.
God, you remember the old days of Void? Where using like reference was you were a sellout if you use reference.
Yeah, or even using like photos in your backgrounds. Yeah. And there's ways to make it work, and there's ways where it works against you. In this comic, it's a good step forward if you want to use models. There's things where it works against the artist, but that's usually because like maybe the actually drawn elements aren't following the same perspective rules as the models, or maybe because they're relying on the models too heavily and not editing it around their drawings. So that's always something to look out for. But it's a fantastic use of like, hey, you only have a limited time. If you don't have time to draw your backgrounds, then do your best to get some models and insert that and then work around it. And so yeah, like even the drawings are really dope. I like the way that you're telling the story of 9 to 5's day to day.
Signing off.
There's a few wonkiness, like there's a few proportion issues here and there, but I feel like that's gonna improve over time. There's really not much I could really like comment on that. You know, a lot of the stuff that I've said in the previous critiques, you could apply it to here. But what I'm trying to figure out is why this juxtaposition between 9 to 5's day to day and what's happening to Redacted. Like, are they in any way going to be connected? Because I feel like that doesn't get answered in this comic.
You don't think that Redacted's murder of that woman influenced 9 to 5?
It might. It shows that in the end.
Spoilers, BT dubs.
Yeah, I know. It shows that in the end. But I feel like there's always like a little bit more that could be done to make me feel like
you feel that it was too much like ships in the night rather than like their actions influence the other.
Exactly. Because as far as I'm concerned, they just kind of read it as like, oh, they're just regular coworkers and da 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 da. And then Redacted does what Redacted do best, and then you get to page 15. You get to the reveal of page 15, and then I get to page 16, and he just continues his day normally. Like, it doesn't feel like his day really got affected, except for like, you know, there's nothing that hints at it except for the use of color. So again, it's just one of those things where it's like, you know, every little detail kind of counts. Like, if you could just push that one little detail, like you'll get the point across a lot better. Right now I'm just staring at the backgrounds because, again, I just really like these use of the models. I feel like that last page really kind of hammers how to use reference in a way that works for you. But I want to see more. Like if this ends up being the winner, I would like to see, you know, what happens to 9 to 5 after this story. Is 9 to 5 going to be like a recurring character? Or was this just like, I don't know. Yeah. Heathen, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think that the weakness of this comic is actually just a symptom of its strength, which for me, with previous Redacted comics as well is sorry, who's the artist?
Candy Corn Rhino.
Rhino. That's right. Okay, so Rhino is really good at. I mentioned this on one of their last battles. They're really good at grounding their characters in a world that feels real. It reacts to them. They react to it. You know, they're especially with all the sort of digital reference being used here for the backgrounds. It in another comic, it could actually feel a little bit too rigid, but because of the 9-to-5 style, I almost feel like this comic succeeds even more at sort of emulating the look of those.
The kid does not agree.
No, he's like, no, I love this comic. What are you talking about?
Shut up! I love it.
Yeah.
At emulating the look of those job onboarding tutorial things. It really does a good job of that. And, you know, I feel like I'm watching a thing where it's just like how to report when you see your coworker stealing or whatever. And because of that, the ending it's the only ending it could be, because he doesn't know that she's dead. So it ends, you know, he rides by on the bus and sees, oh, there's a commotion. Somebody got hurt or whatever. He shows up to work the next day, sees that her chair is empty, and why would he assume she's dead? So the ending is just, oh, he had to do all of her work because she didn't show up for work. If anything, he might be grumbling about that. I don't know if that'd be in character.
Yeah.
That was something that I wished we would have seen from their opponent when it was featured in their comic, that there was some reaction, at least to some degree. Because it feels like things happened around you, and for 9-to-5, nothing of consequence was really, nothing influenced them.
Well, it completely ruined his schedule. We see with the clocks that he arrives at his desk at exactly 9 o'clock.
But you don't even see a reaction of what he feels about that. You just see the change in schedule, and he acts per normally. Even without knowing anything about the coworker, I would have liked to have seen some emotion, especially contrasted with a dinosaur who emotes so much.
Yeah, that's definitely, like, again, another readability thing, or like a clarity thing. And I'm seeing Candy Corn actually came up with or they commented saying that they were just trying to show that, you know, Redacted's action has consequences, not for him but for other people too. And that's a great goal to have. It's always good to actually have those types of goals when you're writing your story. But yeah, like it could have been clearer. I didn't read it like that. I definitely read it like you two, where it's just like he had his 9-to-5, he sees this incident, and then he goes to work the next day and he has the other 9-to-5. And except for that last panel, the last panel hints it for me. But again, it's not clear that it doesn't have to hit me over the head, but it wasn't clear that he's actually like upset that he didn't see his coworker.
It would have been cool to see a secondary panel in that last panel with his expression, or maybe a tightening of the mouth or something, or maybe something that they were typing up on the computer, just to give us that hint.
I guess the color, and I wouldn't say his posture looks particularly depressed or anything, but he's hunkered over, he's working, he just does the work that needs to be done. But, you know, I don't know if you misspoke or if you actually didn't catch this, but like, he doesn't just work his next 9-to-5. He's there late. He's working late. So that's the consequence of that. But yeah, we don't get to see if that bothers him. We assume might, because he's so rigid in his routine, but he just seems like a robot. And again, when I mentioned before that, like, this is the way that this comic just kind of had to end because of that adherence to logic and the world following the rules. If in order for us to really get more of an emotional reaction from him or any kind of thing like that, there needed to be an establishment. They would have had to focus more on the fact that, like, his coworker is, you know, I think you'd have to go off of this script a little bit, because you'd have to say, give a reason for him to expect his coworker there the next day, that, you know, he gets somehow stood up in a more personal way than just, oh, she wasn't there. Because again, you
would have liked to have seen some kind of interaction to see the influence of that interaction being lost.
Because the ending, is dulled a little bit for us because we're seeing it from 9 to 5's perspective, which is that he's not mourning the loss of his coworker because he doesn't know that she's the one that died. So you would have to make that make some more sense, which would be like, well, her car was left there overnight. So there should be talk in the office of like, oh, she didn't show up, but her car's here. And like, that would be a totally different, I mean, that would just be way more of a comic. So on that
real
note,
quick, I did want to say that there are some voiders who are viewing this, especially on page 15, where his bus goes by the scene of the crime, as sort of a inference that he's aware or makes a connection, which to me I'm kind of split on, because all you see is a body bag. You don't see any characteristic markers that would make him go, that could have been her. Or at least,
like the scarf. Like you could have used the scarf right there.
Yeah, see, but I think it was intentional. I think the implication is meant to be that he doesn't make the connection.
Yeah, that was my impression, because you don't see her car there on page 15. You just see the ambulance, the police car, and a body bag.
Yeah. He has his eyes closed in the panel previous, and then we don't see a reaction from him even in that panel. We don't cut to his face shows. I almost wonder if the bus just kind of goes by so quick that he's just completely in his own world and doesn't even notice the...
Oh, that makes it more depressing.
He has no regard, because, he just doesn't say anything about it. But what I was going to say before is that I think this is a good opportunity for Void to be Void in the way that excites me about what this site is. I'm kind of calling it a little early here, but I think Redacted side should win this battle. I don't know what the scores look like. I haven't voted on it personally, but as two different comics go, this one I thought kind of blew the other one out of the water, to be honest. Even using the the probably digital reference tools or whatever was used to draw a lot of these backgrounds and stuff like that, there was a lot of drawing still going on in this. And to deliver a comic this complete and with that is paced this really well is very impressive. So I really liked this comic, and I would love to see, no pressure, not saying that you gotta do this, but I would love to see Fred show what happens after this in the next comic, in the next battle.
This is just... Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I'm wrapping it up. Just how that office dynamic might, just take this and roll with it. I don't want to see... to see this comic disregarded. I would like to see, if they win, I would like to see what happens next.
Yeah, and I think that's completely okay. Like, this is just personal Junkcast opinion, but if you don't know what the current scores are, if you haven't voted yet, but you still have an opinion, I think that that's completely valid. I think this entire cast, by definition, is an opinion, and we're all going to have leanings. We're all going to like something better, and I think that's okay to say, so long as you're not sitting here going, I like this, and everybody else who doesn't is stupid, Oh,
no. Yeah, definitely. Disagree with me. I'm not saying the other comic's bad. I like the other comic.
If anything, I personally liked Fred's side. I just loved the thinking outside of the box, and I love the practical solutions to something that happens every day in the city that's so crazy that people just kind of go with it. And it makes you wonder, how does this city function with monsters and cryptids and Armageddons happening? And Fred thought of here's a welfare car so that you can eat some meat. And, you can actually function in a crazy city in a long-term way. I just thought that was such an out-of-the-box thinking thing alongside the media that they chose, which kind of tipped the scales for me, because I don't know the scores and I haven't voted yet, because I wanted to kind of go into this and hear your guys' opinions and then go into it. So it's funny that we've both read the same comic and we feel completely opposite.
Yeah, Fred's comic is definitely, I think, more than the sum of its parts. It makes you think about the implications of what's being discussed there, and it just kind of makes your imagination go in a way that the other one is more of a confined narrative where you are being shown something very intentional. The other one is a little more conceptual, and it's like, oh yeah, this makes me think about how this all works and want to, see
for sure
from that character.
I just want to add my 2 cents real quick with Candy Corn's comic. I feel that I'd love the fact that even though it's clear your comfort zone is furries, or I'm not sure what you call lizard scalies. I'm not familiar with the fandom, but yeah, help me out, Ernesto and Heathen. If you know the facts
Hey.
and the terms, hit me up.
Guillermo del Toro calls it scaly, so
Oh, there we go. I love Tauros, so I'm going to call it scalies. I know your comfort zone is scalies and not humans, so I commend you for putting so many background characters that were human beings in this comic, because that means that you were making the effort, and I love seeing that effort. That said, it's definitely clear that there are some anatomy and wonky issues. I'm very confused as to why the humans and Redacted himself were so long. Like, I noticed that you went really long on the torsos, which I think that I don't want to say you felt more on model, because I mean, it's your own character, right? But it felt more proportional in your previous comics, especially with Gut Smasher.
Mm.
I don't know. Everybody just seemed really elongated for this comic, and I wasn't really sure why.
Yeah, and I feel like in those cases too, like even if that's the intention, like if that's the comfort level, always push to kind of convince us that it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I meant to do all that.
Yeah, like, you know, it's a proportional thing. And so like even things like how you proportion the clothes, not saying that the clothes have to be shorter than the people, but even how you like space out details on like clothing and stuff, that could always kind of help add to the style that you're trying to do.
And I know that he mentioned earlier in the lecture notes that there were inspos with Frank Miller and I can only assume Sin City.
Yeah,
and I feel
that's
definitely evident in the first couple pages where we start off really dark. And I kind of wish that we'd stuck with those heavy spot blacks, because I really dug it.
They were great.
Especially in the moments where he passes by the scene of the crime. If things had been darker, we'd seen those spot blacks. I just would have loved to have seen that returned, and not just in the flashbacks or the beginning pages.
Yeah, I gotcha.
But yeah, that's all I got. Do you guys have any final things to say about this comic or any of the comics that we've spoken on?
You know, it's kind of nice. I've been trying to get back into critiquing some of the comics. I know a lot of people have trouble giving critiques or like receiving critiques or whatever, and I hope I could like provide a very, I guess, like an academic way of doing it to help people out.
Are you saying that you're opening up your DMs to people open to discussing how and when to critique?
Yeah.
It's like, sure.
On top of that, like, again, for me, everything is like, dude, your art style could be your art style. It could be your art style, but like, I just want to make sure everything is clear. Like, your story's clear. The way you're drawing the story is clear. So,
and I kind of like that this era of Void, and you would know this better, Ernesto. When Void started, it was all about the spandex. It was all about how can the comics that won were the ones that did the best action scenes. There was no story to it, but the punch looked great, and that's what the community wanted. This new community that we have now is we care about the story. We want to know if this is cohesive. We want to know this character's, journey. And I find that the at least to me, the votes and the comics and battles that are winning are the ones that have that great story. And as someone who values storytelling and just character development, I love that shift.
Yeah, and I'm very superficial on the other hand. I like art, like I like cool art over story sometimes. But like you could have all the cool art in the world, but like if it just doesn't read well, like I'm not gonna read your comic. And I've actually had those issues in the past. And I've actually had beefs with people because I'll tell them, hey, your line work is too muddied up, so I couldn't separate your characters from your backgrounds, and I couldn't get past the second panel. And also, before I forget this, I'll say this just because I want to give a shout out to PETA. When it comes to crits, I think old school Void used to just kind of be like, here, let's harp on the negative. And I don't think a crit is a crit when you have something negative to say or when you have something nitpicky to say. I think a crit is a crit when you're trying to offer. We talked about like, we talked about how like, sometimes you shouldn't just mention that they're doing something good, but I think that's important because if you can mention, hey, you're on the right track with this.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You could always tell people you're on the right track with this. Your backgrounds are looking solid, but you could always make it better. If you're just going in and saying negative things and you're listing negative things, and I know Heathen's going to disagree with me, PETA kind of said it best. It doesn't become a critique anymore. It just becomes a complaint. So without all that said, is that what I'm hoping with this cast is that people could kind of see, like, there's several different ways you could kind of look at these things, and it doesn't have to be a subjective opinion. It could be like you can do it very objectively, like how we did it today.
For sure.
And I also like to thank you guys for inviting me to this Junkcast.
Aw, look at you being all civil and diplomatic.
I'm trying to be. I'm media trained.
Nice.
Yeah.
Heathen, do you have any final thoughts before I sign us off?
Yeah, I just really wanted to kind of touch on the idea of what I would say the myth of the unworthy. I see a lot of people often will say, I don't feel qualified to critique this or comment, offer anything to this. And all I want to say is that most critics are not creators. You do not have to do a thing in order to be critical of it. You don't have to be a filmmaker to say why you did or didn't like a movie any more than you have to be a comic artist or writer or anybody to be able to say if a comic worked for you or not and why.
Yeah, I completely agree. I can't tell you the amount of people I've met who may not have any technical art skills that they can do, but they're fantastic critiquers because they have an eye for art.
Yeah, that's all a critic is someone who is discerning and able to explain their opinion.
Yeah, I don't see it as any different as someone who watches a baseball or basketball game and they know what a good player looks like, but even though they don't play basketball themselves.
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah, everybody can look at something and say whether it worked for them or not. And the thing with comics is that unlike other art mediums, I don't think comics are capital A art. They are a storytelling medium, and at the very, they are not meant to be interpreted differently. Now, themes and things like that is another story, but like the actual content, the story being delivered in a comic is not meant to be subjective. Anybody should be able to pick it up and understand what is being done, what's going on. It's the difference between the actual themes that are happening and whether you understand the plot, but the camera work, the characters need to look like who they're supposed to be. They should not be confusing on a technical level. And that is stuff that anybody can critique, because you can look at it and you can say, I wasn't sure what was happening here. And that's valuable information, even if you can't offer how you could do it differently. I think that's another point too, is I try to only point out things that I can offer an alternative to or explain why. But if you can't quite on why something wasn't working for you, as long as you express that sort of humbly and not in an aggressive, like, I just didn't like it way. It's very valuable in a community setting, especially, to say, this wasn't working for me. I am not very good at explaining it, but maybe someone else can. But that wasn't working. I think that for the artist, that is still useful, because that's the thing about not getting comments at all on your comics, is you just don't even know if anybody read it or got it or understood what it was, and that's valuable going into their next battle, to know, like, hey, your clarity needs work. Oh, okay, I won't make the same choices and things, and a lot of that is hard to see from your own comic. That technical stuff is one thing, but the storytelling clarity is something that is almost impossible for the artists themselves to look at objectively without a lot of time between they look at it. But yeah, that's pretty much all I would say, is don't feel intimidated about just sharing your comments. And if you're not being toxic about it, and no matter whether somebody wants an in-depth critique or doesn't want any critique or anything like that, just leave a comment. Even if it's just, oh, that was so cool, or, oh, I can't wait for the next one. If the battle's not posted yet, get in there, get hype. I love seeing all the clamor for things. I like seeing discussion and discourse and debate about it. I love when someone gives a hot take or didn't quite get it and they say so, and then other people kind of jump in and try to just talking about the comic. Is just that's so cool. Just
We
why?
definitely just want to see more talking in the comments. Like, I think I speak for every artist who is in the community when I say, when you post a comic on Void, people want to hear, for good or ill, what you have to say about it. So long. I mean, we're all friends here, right? And we all want to see everybody get better because we all want to read better comics. So just keep on commenting, and I definitely hope to see this activity spike and people contact Heathen and Ernesto, because I know Ernesto hangs out in Spitspat just talking about like, all right, man, I got the latest battle open. How do I comment on this? I'd love your feedback. Let's do that. Let's commiserate. Let's brainstorm.
And let me say one more thing too.
Oh my gosh.
No. I'm just a quick thing. It has something to do with what we're talking about. Orion actually has a little bit of a little template that offers you, a little questionnaire. It's just, here, say something positive, here, say something negative, then conclude it. It's called like the crit sandwich. So please, if you guys are ever in a position where you don't know how to give a crit, hit up Orion. He'll give you that little template, and you can just fill that out.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
That said, thank you guys so much for coming on and giving us your insight about the things that you're passionate about, of what makes a good crit. I'd love that there were so many answers. It's not a one size fits all. It really just sort of varies from comic to comic and from passion to passion and artist to artist. Thank you guys so much for coming on. And I'm so excited to kind of open up Junkcast to possibly other voiders who have, passions about, say, color or storytelling or action or even Raji's sound effects. Like, these are the things that I want to feature. And these are the things that I want you guys to listen to, because I can only assume these are the things you guys want to know. Anything else you guys have to say?
No, just thanks for having us on.
Oh.
I'm gonna go think of what I'm gonna do to your characters.
Aw, dang. Ernesto, sign off.
It's great talking to you guys, or it's great having you guys listen to me. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but I'm looking forward to seeing more comics. I might even have a few battles coming up here and there.
Please do.
And and if you guys are ever having a tough time on this site, feel free to hit me up, man. I'm there to be your senpai, your big brother right here. I'm
counselor and critique sensei. Love it.
Yeah, definitely.
So my inbox is always open. I've got a few people that'll hit me up pretty regularly, but I am always open to giving feedback on a battle or anything. And I love doing drawovers and red lines and things like that, if people are into that stuff.
That I can attest to, and they are super duper helpful. I love it.
Yeah, that's what Void's all about.
Yeah, I think the main thing is I try to critique and draw over and do things that I desperately want other people to do for me. So I hope nobody ever feels like I'm stepping on their toes or assuming that they, want me to show them a different way to do it. I try to approach it the way that I just want everybody to be. I just want other people to just be like, if you move this over
take
here,
it with a grain of salt. Yeah.
And on that note, I'm going to shut it off here, you guys. Thank you guys so much for listening. Craig, sign us off. Bye.